Music in 2013 brought us unforgettable moments filled with classic hits from a multitude of genres and artists. These moments are seared in our minds as we look back on what was prevalent in the culture and in our lives when these songs came out. We all remember where we were, the memories associated with the music, and how it made us feel. But it wasn't just songs that captured our attention, it was albums. The albums that dominated 2013 were interesting, but one album in particular changed music and turned an icon into a legend. There comes a point in an artist's career where they go from an icon to a legend, a special moment in history that changes their career and music forever. From the likes of Michael Jackson and Madonna to Prince and Whitney Houston, certain artists have pushed the boundaries of music, ushering a new landscape for newer artists to thrive in. Since the turn of the 21st century, several artists have already emerged and made their mark on music and pop culture as a whole. Some have made waves bigger than others, but on today's episode, we're paying special attention to none other than Beyoncé. Beyoncé at this point needs no introduction. She's been in the spotlight for decades, from her time as the frontwoman of Destiny's Child to her own impressive solo career that speaks for itself. From headlining the Super Bowl twice, to breaking records with Grammy wins, to exemplifying what it means to be a live performer, she's never been a stranger to pushing boundaries as she continues to change the game in different ways. On December 13th, 2013, music was never the same as Beyoncé stopped the world with her surprise visual album that no one saw coming. Packed with 14 songs and paired with 17 music videos, Beyoncé closed the year with a bang while taking a creative risk that could have very well backfired. The album represented a shift in Beyoncé going forward that would lay the groundwork for some of her most important work and establish her as the legend she is today. On this episode, we're focusing on Beyoncé's 2013 surprise visual album, Beyoncé. We'll discuss the album and its meaning in the context of Beyoncé's career and how it impacted music and pop culture at large. This is how Beyoncé's surprise album changed music. In order to understand the impact of Beyoncé's visual album, we have to understand who Beyoncé was leading up to the album's release and the mechanisms in place that allowed the album to exist in the first place. Let's rewind a little bit. Beyoncé, after much success with Destiny's Child, finally broke off and went solo in 2003. Carefully managed by her father, Matthew Knowles, she immediately established herself as a force to be reckoned with her debut single, Crazy in Love. The pressure to release a single has to be immense, but imagine releasing a classic as your first single. Sheesh. The song was an immediate cultural phenomenon and stayed at the top spot for 8 weeks. Her debut album, Dangerously in Love, gave us hits like Naughty Girl, Me, Myself, and I, and of course, Baby Boy. An important aspect to mention during this time is the promotion of the album. In the lead up to the album, Beyoncé employed what has become to be known as the traditional album rollout. A traditional album rollout is when an artist promotes their upcoming album for an extended period, usually beginning with the lead single. Released 1 to 2 months before the album, a lead single is a song that creates buzz and gives a sneak peek into what the album has in store. Usually the single is promoted to radio, and in the weeks leading up to the release of the album, the song is then performed many times as the artist makes the usual rounds at radio stations, morning shows, daytime shows, late night shows, and commercials. The key was to generate hype for the artist to maximize the amount of album and single sales. During this time, an artist may premiere a music video, tease a feature or track list, or even grace us with an album cover. Usually a release date is announced and fans are left to agonizingly wait for new music to arrive. Labels shell out large amounts of money on promo and billboards to ensure that you know when their artist has an album coming out. Notably, the traditional album rollout was susceptible to leaks. This era was most popular during the time where people were still purchasing physical CDs, so it wasn't uncommon for whole projects to be leaked days and sometimes weeks before an album drop. This would greatly affect first week sales, and some artists would be forced to push up their release dates to further stop damage to their sales. The traditional album rollout has been a staple in the music industry since, well, forever. It's not until recently that more artists have begun to embrace different ways to release their music, but let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. So during the promo run for Beyoncé's first album, she made the usual stops at late night shows and gave several performances at various televised events. In Beyoncé's interview, she came off as pleasant, composed, safe, mature, humble, but also very private.
I know you say I don't talk about my personal life because if I did, I wouldn't have one. But can't you just at least tell me if you have a boyfriend, for crying out loud? I'm not going to ask if he's a good kisser or, you know, what you've done together, anything like that. But, I mean, are you dating anyone?
You already know my answer, Kate.
Oh, come on, Beyonce. You know, otherwise people are just going to speculate. They're going to be rumors. Why don't you just say I'm seeing somebody and I like him or whatever?
Because
and his name is Jay-Z.
You're very good. She's very good, everyone.
In an industry where celebrities feel the need to connect to their audience, often by revealing a lot about themselves, Beyoncé from an early age made it imperative to keep her personal life to herself, no matter how hard the media tried to pry it out of her. Audiences loved Beyoncé the performer, but there became an increasing desire from fans to get to know the real Beyoncé, and not just the extremely polished veneer we see on the outside. More on this later. The onslaught of heavy promo worked well for her, as the album debuted at number 1 with 317,000 units sold in its first week and 11 million units sold worldwide, en route to earning Beyoncé 5 Grammys at the 2004 Grammy Awards. All of this proved Beyoncé wasn't just a singer branching off from a girl group to go solo. No, she was letting the world know that she was a force to be reckoned with. Not too bad for a debut album. After getting solid footing with her first album, Beyoncé set forth for her next album called B-Day. Recorded in just 2 weeks, the album was released 3 days prior to her 25th birthday on September 1st, 2006. The album saw Beyoncé taking more strides artistically as an artist. The album featured more live instrumentation, 70s funk and R&B elements, as well as bounce. She released visuals for every song on the album. Yes, videos for every song on the album. This era was important because it was Beyoncé's first attempt at establishing herself as a visual artist. The album gave us monster hits such as Irreplaceable, Ring the Alarm, Deja Vu, and of course, Beautiful Liar. Using the same traditional album rollout, she made the usual obligatory stops at various shows and continued to promote the album by performing, well, everywhere. If Matthew Knowles knows one thing, he knows how to get his daughter booked and busy. And boy was she ever during this era. The album sold 541,000 copies in its first week and showed that Beyoncé was capable of even more growth as an artist. Now, if Beyoncé was capable of more growth, she sure showed it in her next era. And here we have 2008's I Am Sasha Fierce. Beyoncé's next album arguably catapulted her to icon status. Wanting to capitalize on her commercial appeal, she created an album to appease, well, everyone. This album saw Beyoncé creating an alter ego for herself named Sasha Fierce. Here, she created a duality for herself. An album that on one side featured more stripped down ballads, and on another side full of fun and sexy songs that can be played in the clubs. The decision to create a body of work like this reeks of a desire to appeal to everyone, and Beyoncé did just that. Instead of trying to appease fans who preferred one style over another, she played to both sides by giving them a little of both. This album arguably turned Beyoncé into Beyoncé, a certified global superstar. Singles such as If I Were a Boy, Diva, Halo, Ego, and even Sweet Dreams were fan favorites, but the song that defined this era was none other than Single Ladies. Single Ladies instantly became one of Beyoncé's signature songs. The simple black and white video with energetic choreography broke the internet before breaking the internet was a thing. Everyone and their moms attempted to learn the choreography and upload their dance to YouTube. In many ways, it was one of the first viral sensations that swept the nation. Some even say,
but Beyoncé had one of the best videos of all time.
More on that in a future video. Beyoncé took promotion into overdrive by appearing on every talk show and every award show you could think of while embarking on her I Am World Tour. In many ways, it was Beyoncé's most commercially successful era. The extensive press tour and performance schedule was grueling, but it was par for the course when it came to traditionally marketing an album. The album was certified double platinum as Beyoncé went on to earn her first nomination for Album of the Year and took home a record 6 Grammys at the 2010 ceremony, the most ever in one night for a female artist. The next era, arguably, is the most pivotal in Beyoncé's career. If I Am Sasha Fierce was considered Beyoncé's commercial peak, her next album 4 would unfortunately be considered her commercial disappointment. After touring her previous album, Beyoncé took a break from music to live life. During this time, she severed professional ties with her father Matthew Knowles and began managing herself. She wanted to take a different approach with this next album and distance herself from the commercial and radio-friendly songs she was making at the time. In an interview with Complex magazine, she stated, "Everything sounds the same on the radio. With 4, I tried to mix R&B from the 70s with 90s rock and roll and a lot of horns to create something new and exciting." When we think about it, was Beyoncé right about everything sounding the same on the radio at the time? In 2011, music was, well, in a weird place. EDM was taking over the charts and many artists were jumping on the trend. LMFAO was party rocking all over the charts, J-Lo and Pitbull were on the floor, Lady Gaga was born this way, and Rihanna was finding love. Meanwhile, Beyoncé stayed true to who she is and forged ahead her way. Her album 4 skirted away from commercial trends, and it was an R&B album released during a time where people wanted to hear anything but that. 3 weeks before the album was released, 4 was leaked in full. Executives at Columbia became worried that the album would underperform, and for Beyoncé's standards, it did. The album sold 310,000 copies in its first week, debuting at number 1, and it became Beyoncé's lowest first week sales debut. Most notably, 4 became Beyoncé's first album to not feature a number 1 single. Speaking of singles, 4 featured some of Beyoncé's signature songs: Run the World, Countdown, Party, End of Time, and the fan favorite Love on Top, which she performed at the 2011 VMAs while creating a pop culture moment when she revealed that she was indeed pregnant. The VMAs was one of many places Beyoncé went to promote the album. Per usual, she made all the rounds on talk show after talk show after talk show, using the same promotional method that everyone else used. This would be seen as the last era in which Beyoncé would give sit-down interviews as she had grown tired of the process. This era for Beyoncé became a turning point. She no longer cared about chart success and was instead focusing on her legacy and making the art that she wanted to make. Although the album wasn't as commercially successful as her previous works, it was an album that she was proud of and marked a transition for her that would change the course of her career. Over a year after giving birth to her daughter Blue Ivy, it was announced that Beyoncé would be headlining the Super Bowl halftime show in 2013. Fans were excited because typically following the announcement of a headliner, an artist will usually drop a single or tease an album, but that didn't quite happen. Beyoncé went on to shut down the Super Bowl literally as she performed her biggest hits in a sort of culmination of her career. She of course brought together Destiny's Child for a reunion and gave what is considered one of the greatest halftime shows of all time. After the performance, fans were expecting Beyoncé to announce a new album or release a single, but that didn't quite materialize. Instead, Beyoncé announced that she'd be going on tour, and later that month, she released a personal HBO documentary titled Life is But a Dream. In the documentary, viewers get a peek into the behind-the-scenes life of Beyoncé as she prepared for the release of her album 4 and anticipated being a mother for the first time. An important part of the documentary that still gets talked about today is a section where Beyoncé talks about the state of the music industry.
People don't make albums anymore. They don't make albums. They just try to sell a bunch of little quick singles and they burn out and they put out a new one and they burn out and they put out a new one. People don't even listen to a body of work anymore.
She was expressing her frustrations about an industry that seems to be more focused on charts and singles instead of creating memorable bodies of work with the focus being on the album. Her frustrations were more than valid given the state of music in 2013. The industry in 2013 was, well, let's take a look. Drake was starting from the bottom, Taylor Swift was feeling 22, Robin Thicke was blurring the lines of consent, Daft Punk was getting lucky, Miley Cyrus was wrecking balls, and Lorde was changing the shape of pop music with Royals. In the meantime, Beyoncé was waiting in the wings to release a body of work that would give the industry the change it was looking for. And on December 13th, 2013, she did just that. At the crack of dawn, with no prior announcement or promotion, Beyoncé dropped her 5th studio album, Beyoncé. The album was immediately met with mass hysteria, tweets, excitement, and utter shock. Not only did fans get a new album, they also got 17 music videos to go along with it. They got it all via iTunes. Beyoncé just released the album and let us all do the promo for her. Interspersed with clips and images from her childhood, Beyoncé was more personal than ever. The album was a visual concept album that broached uncharted territory for Beyoncé, with topics like sexuality, feminism, infidelity, motherhood, and even cunnilingus explored on the album. Beyoncé went harder in a completely new direction. Sure, she's always been sexy, but Beyoncé displayed a raw, more intimate version of herself that got fans excited even more. Gone were the moments where Beyoncé closed the public off from her relationship. In songs like Drunken Love, she openly discussed the couple's drunken escapades on the beach. In comparison to her previous work, the self-titled album was bold as opposed to safe, trend-setting as opposed to trend-chasing, and unforgettable as opposed to forgettable. Take a look at Beyoncé's prior album covers. All of them are beautiful, yes, but they're all in the vein of what we'd expect from a Beyoncé album. Beautiful cover with Beyoncé prominently displayed on the album. With the self-titled album, it's completely different. It's a simple black background with pink text displaying her name. By the looks of it alone, it shows a more complete departure from what Beyoncé's done in the past, and the album certainly delivered on that front. She worked with new collaborators and producers to craft an album that was a middle finger to her previous work and to the music industry. With the success of the release, she added to her legacy by doing something that no other artist dared to do. The album was a sonic departure from her previous works, as she opted for experimental and immersive sounds that gave the album a unique vibe. Songs like Drunken Love played with elements of dark R&B that we'd see later in artists like The Weeknd with songs like The Hills. Album releases being a huge event is something that Beyoncé missed about albums from older generations. So she gave us an album that we would never forget. Music publications, news outlets, magazines, and fans praised her artistic endeavor, and the album received glowing reviews, becoming the highlight of 2013. The album, which was initially an iTunes exclusive, debuted at number 1 with 617,000 units sold in just 3 days of tracking in the US. After 3 days of availability worldwide, the album sold 828,000 copies, becoming the fastest selling album in iTunes history and becoming certified double platinum by the end of its run. It became Beyoncé's 5th consecutive number 1 album on the Billboard 200, showing that no promo means no problem for Beyoncé. Part of the album's sales success is due to the fact that individual singles could not be purchased. In order to hear individual songs, one had to purchase the entire album in order to hear the full project the way Beyoncé intended. Beyoncé's surprise release sent shockwaves throughout the industry, but contrary to popular belief, she actually wasn't the first modern-day artist to drop a surprise album. In 2007, after leaving their label, Radiohead announced on their blog that their new album In Rainbows would drop in 10 days. They then posted a link to the album where fans could pay any amount of their choosing to download the new music. This instance was the first time an artist of this caliber uniquely released an album in this way. Radiohead was the first, but they certainly wouldn't be the last. When it comes to Beyoncé's surprise album, it's not about when she did it, but about how she did it. Keeping the album under wraps was one thing, but the execution of the release was another. She may not have been the first, but what Beyoncé's album did was popularize the idea of a surprise album. Beyoncé used the goodwill and industry respect she'd built up over a long career, and probably the use of many non-disclosure agreements, to keep the album secret and create a project that deviated from her past work. The album was dropped on a Friday when the traditional music release day was on a Tuesday. After seeing the album's success despite the limited window to gain additional sales, it's hard not to argue that Beyoncé was a major influence in the music industry, shifting the music release day from Tuesday to Friday. This channel was made to dive deep into topics in an interesting and honest way. Part of that honesty comes with acknowledging that not everyone could release an album the way Beyoncé did and achieve the same level of success. Sure, the goodwill and trust she'd built up with her fan base helped her, but a big reason why the surprise album worked so well is because, well, it was released by Beyoncé. The bigger the artist, the more impact a surprise album generates. The release strategy was a risk, but how big a risk is it when one of the biggest artists in music drops an album? It's not enough to just release an album, but the content itself has to be good enough to sustain past the initial hype and surprise, and Beyoncé did just that. Only a select few artists have the ability to release an album with no promotion, using only the hype of their name, the internet, and their credibility to sell an album. This of course doesn't take away from Beyoncé's success, but it's something worth noting. In the years following the release, several artists released their own surprise albums with little or no prior announcement. In 2020, Taylor Swift, who's been known for extensive album rollouts, decided that in a pandemic when people were stuck at home, it was time for something different. So she released her 8th studio album Folklore, giving her fans just a 16-hour window before the album was released that midnight. Everyone from Drake with If You're Reading This It's Too Late, Miley Cyrus with Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets, Eminem with Kamikaze, Kid Cudi, D'Angelo, U2, and more all tried their hands at surprise albums with varying results. It's safe to say that Beyoncé inspired these artists to ditch the tried and true method of releasing an album in favor of something more experimental and exciting. Instead of spending money on elaborate rollouts and month-long promotional tours, artists began to entertain saving money on the rollout of the album and instead putting the extra money into the album itself. Apart from surprise releasing, Self-Titled pushed other artists to control their narrative creatively. Beyoncé's emphasis on visual storytelling opened up the floodgates for other artists to try their hand at using the visual medium to support their music. These videos served as a way to emphasize an album as a full body of work that has to be seen as well as heard. Several artists took a page from Beyoncé's book to include cohesive visuals in their projects. Janelle Monáe released a 48-minute emotion picture in 2018 to support her acclaimed album Dirty Computer. Solange directed and edited a 33-minute film to go along with her 2019 album When I Get Home. In 2021, Halsey released a feature film alongside her album If I Can't Have Love, Give Me Power. In 2021, Casey Musgraves released a visual companion film to go along with her album Star-Crossed. In 2020, The Weeknd released a short film that continued the album's storyline in a compelling way for the release of his album After Hours. And Beyoncé herself followed up her self-titled album by further establishing herself as a visual artist with 2016's earth-shaking masterpiece Lemonade and her visual album Black is King, released in 2020. In 2015, Beyoncé was nominated for 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, for her surprise album. For the year she had in 2013 and 2014, she was widely expected to take the top prize of the night, Album of the Year. In pure Grammy fashion, however, she lost Album of the Year to Beck's Morning Phase. Many pundits were stunned at how an album that pushed the bounds of music and artistry was snubbed. But at the end of the day, the Grammys and other award bodies don't determine or represent cultural impact. People do. When we think of Beyoncé's self-titled album, we think of an artist evolving and pushing our imagination when it comes to what we expect from an album. It represents an artist taking full control of their career and narrative. It represents an artist releasing their art when they want, how they want, and where they want. The album was just as much a personal triumph as it was an industry milestone. It brought back the idea of an album release being an event and focused on the album as a full body of work and not just a compilation of singles and throwaway tracks. It showed that music isn't something that has to be promoted. It's something that's created, released, and enjoyed. More artists became inspired to be more creative and control their album rollout on their terms while maximizing their creativity to do something unconventional. Beyoncé took her career to new heights and showed critics that she wasn't slowing down, but only getting started. In an industry that likes to push women over 30 to the background, Beyoncé pushed back on that idea tenfold. She was already an icon, but the self-titled album turned Beyoncé into a legend. At the end of the day, she changed the game with that digital drop. You know where you were when that digital popped. She stopped the world. Male or female, it made no difference. She stopped the world, and the world stopped.
Carry on.